Hi, I'm Beth Neville, and we're outside in our hydrangea garden. I've decided to call it after my parents, the Philip and Harriet Egan Hydrangea Garden, because there were two gifts to us when they died of hydrangeas. And it's turning out to be a very pretty garden, and I decided that today we should use as a subject for the next two segments how to draw and paint a hydrangea. The first thing we need to do in order to paint a hydrangea is we have to examine it and try to figure out how is it put together, what's its structure. It's very difficult to paint anything if you don't understand its structure. I'm reading a book now about Leonardo da Vinci, and he did a lot of anatomical studies where he actually looked at cadavers and so on to be able to figure out how to be so precise with the human body. So we're going to come over here, have to figure out which hydrangea I'm willing to sacrifice. I think we're going to sacrifice this little one down here. Yes. So here we are. A hydrangea is really complex. It's even more difficult than to draw a rose. Now there are two kinds of hydrangeas in our garden. One is the very traditional pale blue that you see down in Cape Cod, and the other is called, I believe, a paniculata. Paniculata has segmented areas in the front, quite a different look. And I'm going to show you a watercolor that I did of that form of hydrangea. I did it yesterday in preparation for this class. This is the form that has large petals around the outside, and then in the center it has these little clusters of small undeveloped flower heads. And so it gives a very different look because you have the pale lavender around the outside and the very intense blue in the middle. So this is my little watercolor that I did yesterday of this type of flower. I like it. I think it's a pretty good little watercolor. I wish this leaf were a little better, bigger, but I'm going to leave it alone. It was a lot of fun to paint. It took me probably about an hour and a half to paint it. For this style of painting, you have to be really, really patient. So we're going to go into our backyard garden and set up a table, and I'm going to try to help you learn how to analyze and draw the hydrangea. And in the next segment, we'll talk about how to paint it. So we'll see you in a minute or two. Hi, we're now back in the back garden, and as we can see, the roses and the clematis are well past their prime. So we're now into Shasta daisy and hydrangea time. That is so beautiful on the Cape. The gray housing, the gray shingles, the blue hydrangeas and the white daisies certainly make the Cape one of the most gorgeous places in the United States. We're not in the Cape, we're in Milton. And I'm happy you joined me. My husband, Bob Neville, is the videographer, and Tom Pilla is helping with the editing. So we're going to take a look at the environment here, and then I have my two forms of the hydrangeas handy, and we're going to take a look at how to draw them. I'm going to be using marker so that it will show up better. The garden still is pretty. Even though some things are not quite in bloom and others are a little past their prime, but it's always interesting to see what is in bloom. So the first thing to do, as I said, is to examine the flower and try to analyze its structure. If we turn it upside down, we can see that each flower head has a single stem. There's the single stem. And that it branches out into both leaves and little flower heads, florets. So there are two big leaves that branch out here, and then there are quite a number of little small leaves that are underlying the flower. And this branch, this part, turns from kind of a pale green to a purple color as it goes out towards the flower. The little florets, the small little fringy looking stuff, also branches off of the same stem that gives you the big flower. So it is complex. I always counsel my students, particularly with something as complex as this, I would say start with the big forms first. It's obvious that we're going to have to leave a lot of space in the middle for the small parts, but we can see the big parts coming around here. So I think it'll be easier to understand what's going on if you are looking at the object the same way that I'm looking at it. So I'm going to, first choice is, do you want to look at it this way, or you know, what you have to think about your composition. What is the most advantageous way to get across the idea of this type of hydrangea? And I think I'm going to pretend that this leaf comes out, but I'm going to come really quite head on. So I start with the big things that are forward. So we're going to start with this, and I'm going to kind of do this faster than I ordinarily would. That represents that, then this is going to represent this petal over here. I would be doing this in pencil if I were to make this into a watercolor. This petal is very interesting because see the little center knob as like a little circle, and then the leaf, the petal flattens out this way, quite fascinating. And I see another little one peeking down, so that represents that. Now let's take this one over here. This has 2 or 3 little nodules coming out, 4 shortened petal here, another very elongated to the side petal, and another little one appearing over there. So we've now done 1, 2, 3, 4. This one is deformed, it's baked in the sun somehow, but I'm still going to add it in. All right, and this is a complicated one also, coming back here. Okay, now we've got a really big one. We're aiming for a circle here. I think the next one to take on, it's not quite a circle, it's more an oval. Let's take on this one over here. And we see a petal back there. There's our beautiful robin out to give us some little song. Now, the next one I'm going to take on is this one, which is diagonally across from that one. And here we see a number of these, up, there, out, and around. Now we're down to these. This is very difficult. One is coming this way and the other's coming that way. So we're going to start with the center. We see a leaf coming up. It's all about looking at what you're doing, thinking about the shape that you see. This is really peculiar. I see a petal coming up just like that, and it's clamshelled with a petal doing that on the other side. That is really quite interesting configuration there. It's really literally a clamshell. I'm seeing it as a line like this, going down like that, and a line like this, going down like that. Isn't that is so strange? But that's what we see. Now there's a bigger one coming around. So we're going to add this little guy down here. He's hidden. I may pretend that we see more of that petal. I'm going to bring it out because I want to get that circle going that is so characteristic of hydrangea petals. Okay, that's pretty much it. It's not a complete circle. There's a hole over here, you see, we're going around, and then there's a missing part here. Now, we're going to take on these clusters, and I see 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6, 7, 8, 9, 10 clusters. I'm not sure we're going to draw them all. 2 or 3 of the clusters are hidden behind this petal. So how are we going to draw them? When I look at them, I see little circles like this, circles. But if I look at them up close, they really aren't circles. They are a stem that leads to sort of a circular part, and some of them, so they're like little ice cream cones. That's really what they are. They're like little baby blue ice cream cones. And you see how they all branch out? So there are, on this one, there's 1, 2, 3 big branches, and then dozens of little small branches leading out to these little circular shapes. And then some of those are open flowers that have this sort of a shape, so like little starbursts. So it's a very strange kind of a plant in a flower form. It's a mixture of the little mini ice cream cones. All right, let's just take this one here. All right, we're going to draw a circle. We're going to draw a couple. I'm going to decide arbitrarily to draw the ice cream cones first. Sorry about my throat. And then put in the little starbursts. Okay, that's one cluster. Let's take another one over here. We see some circles. We see some little mini ice cream cones. And the ice cream cones come out from the center, and then some of this little starburst stuff. So for each, and then there's some that you see behind, that makes it even more interesting, additional parts. So we continue. Let's take one that's behind a petal. Let's draw some circles. Now these, I'm just drawing conceptually. I'm not actually looking at every single one of these little clusters. Now that I've determined how I'm going to shape them, I don't feel that it's necessary to examine every one. If you were one of these botanical artists, very popular right now to be a botanical artist, you would actually examine every single one. If there were 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6, if there were 15 of them, you would have 15. I am not a botanical artist. I am not interested in that. It's too mechanical for me. I like a little more spontaneity in my art. So I am, once I've determined what these shapes are going to be like, I am going to kind of make them up a little bit. All right, now let's just examine what we would do with a leaf. I'm going to switch over. I may not finish this drawing today, but let's just take a leaf. Let's take this one. That leaf comes out from behind, and it comes out from the pivotal center, which I can actually see through the little bursts of color. So, and then the big stem comes down here. This is visible, quite interesting, and these lines will support these little clusters. So you see, it's quite interesting. Let me hold it up this way. If we hold it up this way, I think you can see how open and lacy that flower is, and you actually do see the stem structure through the flower, making it even more complicated. All right, so I'm going to say that the leaf is branching out here. Now this leaf is quite interesting. It's symmetrical, and its basic shape is very narrow, then it bellows out, very narrow, a big bellow this way. And when it gets further up, from about here up, it becomes serrated. So it has this basic structure. That is its structure. And then it has veins that branch out. So we're going to imagine that bellowing out. Now we're getting to the serrated sedge, which ends in a long point, back to serrated, and then back to smooth. And in order to make this look even more like a hydrangea leaf, we can draw in some of the veins. Now, it's pretty obvious. I like that leaf. That's a good one. Now there are these little baby leaves up here. So let's take on a little baby leaf. That also does not have a serrated edge. That's quite interesting. It has a smooth edge. And let's say there's another one here. They have smooth edges. So if you were going to paint this, let's just stop here and get some green. All right, if you were going to be painting this, wonderful wind today, we're at the tail end of a hurricane that did not give us the 5 inches of water. You would be painting here. You'd be filling in this, all right? And the petal formation would be outside of, would be on top of, I should say, on top of the leaf. So you would see the leaf structure behind, all right? Now let's just pretend here, let's take the blue. Yep, all right, let's pretend. All right, so here's our leaf, petal on top, and the leaf behind. All right, here's the petal. But we would see that green peeking out from behind. Let's take this leaf here. These would be filled in, all right, with a much more lavender color. I don't happen to have a lavender color in my marker kit. So, as I said, I'm choosing marker so it shows up better. Okay, so that leaf back here is going to go around behind the little florets. And actually the stem, it's quite interesting to me, the stem, if you notice, is not green. It's like a very pale maroon. It's a reddish color. And that was very interesting. When I did my little sample yesterday, I really did pull in some magenta in here. Oh dear, this is a terrible marker. Sorry about that, we'll have to ignore this marker. So we actually see some of that color coming through. I think this is where we're going to stop. Actually, let me point out one more thing. When we do this form of hydrangea, there's a wonderful bee hovering over it, it's quite different because each one of these little flowers is clustered together to make more of a pom-pom shape. And they tend to be more circular in form. Tom is going to put up on the screen one of my favorite paintings that I've done. It's an acrylic painting where the acrylic is watered down like watercolor. And it is a large circular vision of hydrangeas. And I drew it very, very carefully and accurately from hydrangeas growing in our garden. All right, well, okay, thanks for watching. And next week we'll work on how we work with the watercolor and the hydrangea. Thank you for watching.